Tonight, we're talking taxes, but maybe in a way you're not used to hearing.
At the legislature, the politicians fight and claw over every dollar, but the reality is millions are left on the table. Tom Lydon of the Fox 9 Investigators is in our newsroom with the story of who doesn't pay and what that means for the rest of us.
Yeah, Jeff and Kelsey, just about any way you slice it, 2018 is going to be a crazy tax year. Home values are going up in some cases by double digits. Most tax levies are expected to rise, not to mention reconciling state and federal tax laws. So, stepping back, what we have for you tonight is a bit of a theoretical exercise, examining who gets a pass when it comes to property taxes, the way we fund the most basic services of local government.
All you have to do is look up to understand these are boom times in Minneapolis, with $1 billion in new construction for the 6th year in a row. And yet, property taxes, especially for homeowners, also continue to go up and up. The reality is, not all property is created equal, not even close.
I have a problem with this.
Carol Becker sits on the little-known and poorly attended Board of Estimation and Taxation that helps determine the property tax levy.
I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong that we are literally just taking money out of people's pockets and giving it to obscenely rich people.
What Becker knows all too well, that even politicians can't comprehend, is just how much property isn't even on the tax rolls. The Fox 9 investigators discovered Minneapolis has nearly $14 billion in tax-exempt property. That represents roughly a quarter of the total taxable value of all property in the city, more than $61 billion. Maps provided by the city assessor's office show all the tax-exempt property in Minneapolis shaded in blue and green. More than $2.3 billion in tax-exempt property is downtown. Some of that'll be obvious, like churches, hospitals, nonprofits, all kinds of government buildings, and of course, schools of every kind. Property owned by the University of Minnesota alone accounts for nearly $2 billion. In St. Paul, by the way, there's $7 billion in tax-exempt property. Again, it's about 23% of the total taxable value of all property in St. Paul.
There are some properties that never get into the pie, right?
Yes,
They're totally exempt.
totally exempt.
Becker says in the last 20 years, the tax burden has quietly shifted. In 1996, homeowners paid about 35% of the property tax bill. Then came the recession and several tax changes, and now homeowners pay 60% of that bill.
We give certain tax breaks to certain groups, and that means that everybody else then has to pay more because they're not paying.
And here's one of those groups in yellow on the map that might not be so obvious. It's also some of the most valuable property in the city.
And in looking at that, the biggest of them are the stadiums, because people don't think, they think, oh, a nonprofit must be a church, but no, like the football stadium, the baseball stadium, all of those are huge properties that are not paying property taxes.
Consider U.S. Bank Stadium, home to the Vikings and operated by the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority. We already know it cost $1 billion to build, 2/3 financed by the public. But the public continues to pay by virtue of the stadium's tax-exempt status. So how much money are we talking about? At our request, the county crunched the tax numbers for U.S. Bank Stadium as if it were taxable. The total tax bill in 2018 would be nearly $38 million. Lots of folks get a slice of that. The state, county, city, and Minneapolis schools. That last part, $4.6 million for Minneapolis schools, sheds a different light on that Super Bowl photo op when NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell got a standing ovation for giving a middle school a check for $220,000. That's pocket change compared to what schools could be getting if the stadium was only on the tax rolls. But as Becker will tell you, this requires thinking about taxes a little differently, a concept known as tax expenditures.
Tax expenditures are when we choose to not collect taxes from a certain group. So people think of it as a tax break.
This is money that we're just not coming in, so it's as good as money that we're spending.
It's exactly the same from a budget perspective as if we wrote a check. But of course, the entities that get this really like it because it doesn't have the obviousness of having to write a check every year.
But there is one place you can find the real price tag. The Minnesota Revenue Department publishes a 200-page book of tax expenditures, listing every tax break, giveaway, and free ride. A who's who of special interest and influence. There's no tax on farm machinery, horses, television commercials, or lawmakers' per diem allowance. Here's pro sports again. No sales tax on stadium suites or Super Bowl tickets. In fact, the total loss statewide from tax-exempt property can be found here too. Nearly $1 billion every year. Another big chunk, $235 million, is diverted from government coffers by something known as tax increment financing. That's when a project is paid for by capturing its property taxes. It's how the city of Minneapolis paid for and continues to pay for the Target Center, home of the Timberwolves and Lynx. Which brings us back to Becker and the tax board, where they recently voted to refinance $74 million in Target Center debt from short to long-term loans before interest rates go up. Becker wanted to renegotiate with Wolves owner Glenn Taylor.
Glenn Taylor is worth $2.6 billion. I looked him up today. $2.6 billion. The Timberwolves have gone up in value hundreds of millions of dollars, in large part because we have built a palace for them.
But the mayor and every other board member said a deal, even a bad one, is still a deal.
If we say we're going to do something and we enter into a contract to make it happen, we need to stand by our word, and so I'll be voting in favor of this.
And once again, Becker was the voice in the wilderness.
I can't see myself voting for this. I just morally and ethically can't.
So next time someone wants more money for teachers, police, or firefighters, or for better streets, or fighting poverty, remember, most all of that is paid for through property taxes. And $37 million a year from a so-called People's Stadium would probably go a long way.
You know, it's hard to blame the Vikings or the Twins for this. They're just getting the deal they can get.
Absolutely.
Who do you blame?
This should have been our elected officials. It should have been the people that were doing the deal. This is costing our community a huge amount of money.
So by now you may be wondering if Minneapolis and St. Paul are unusual with 23% of their property classified as tax exempt. We wondered that too, so we started calling other comparable cities. Seattle, only 17% of their property is tax exempt. Denver, 13%. Other end of the spectrum, you have a city like Pittsburgh, which has several universities and hospitals. 36% of their property is tax exempt.